And we're here with Mike Salemi, performance specialist and creator of Kettlebell Lifestyle. And my friend, Mike, welcome to the Optimal Performance Podcast.
What's up, Roger? Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to be here and freaking stoked to chat it up with you.
Yeah, this is cool because this is going to give us an opportunity that we have not had yet, which is to like drill down on some stuff, to go deep on some stuff. You know, we've known each other for a little bit, and we sort of know what each other do, but not like. So this is perfect. I like to start with the same question, especially for people who are performance oriented, like yourself, experts in the field of performance and nutrition. I'm just curious, what time is it, where you are, and what have you put into your body?
That's a good question. So right now I'm in California, the Bay Area. It's 2:25 p.m. and I'm sipping on some bone broth, baby. I'm sipping on a nice thing of homemade bone broth that my sister-in-law made for me. And it seems to be you can see the color of it right now. It's like she puts turmeric and man, I think they do like a process where it's like 36 hours roasting the bones and all the vegetables, fennel. So today is when I'm doing days of heavy work and a lot of cognitive work, I honestly don't like eating a lot. So what I find is when I eat a lot of meat or heavier type foods, it slows me down a little bit mentally. So knowing that we had our podcast and such today, and I wanted to make sure I was sharp and ready. For the most part, I've had bone broth throughout the day. I had 2 dates from her date farm, and then this morning just two sunny side up eggs. That was it. So some fat, some stuff to keep me going during the day, but nothing crazy.
Nice. Yeah, most folks have a similar answer who are, performance specialists. The not so much the authors and the doctors, really, that I have, but for people who are performance specialists, masters of their craft, like they have similar answers. They'll either eat very little or nothing at all, or just be buzzing on nothing but coffee. Do you drink coffee?
I do actually. I did have. I'm sorry. I did
Gotcha.
actually. You got me. You got me. And how could I forget? How could I forget? I'm actually. I had a really short shot of espresso, and with a little bit of butter this morning, early with those eggs. Yeah.
Any vitamins or nootropics or anything like that?
You know what? To be honest, not really. From time to time, the only one that I usually do take is from Neurohacker Collective, Qualia.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only one that I will take from time to time for like when I'm presenting or stuff like that. And I've gotten for me, it feels really good and it tends to support. But even with stuff like that, like I'm honestly not a huge supplement guy. So even me say like I take that supplement for me is a big statement. Usually everything's just whole foods. For the most part, not this year, but I would grow my food in the back. Go to for me the best supplement in the world. So I support local farms. And especially right now, Belcampo meats, and I'll do like, dude, there is nothing for me personally that I've noticed an actual uptake in my vitality, how I feel, how I perform, than grass-fed, grass-finished liver. Like
Yeah.
no supplement in the world. I mean, I know supplements, quality I feel, but like a lot of supplements from, I don't even know, X, Y, and Z, multivitamin, that, I honestly never really felt anything. But liver, dude, I'm like, Captain America or like Wolverine, it feels like after.
Do you gut it raw? How do you do it?
So I've done it in multiple ways, and it probably will gross most people out. But you're smiling, so I think I know we're kindred spirits in this one. But I used to just chop a little bit raw and throw it in a shake and blend it up. But lately, basically, what it is I really love it with ground beef, and so usually for like a 2-pound pack of ground beef, I would say it comes out to maybe like a size of an ice cube. And then I mince the liver like really, really good. And then I'll mix it with the ground beef and some onions. And that's usually how I've been taking. So nothing crazy, not a lot, but 3 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week. And I can honestly say, for me at least, it feels pretty significant.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, and that's how I feed it to my kids. Is I sneak it into grass-fed burger, and we do burger no bun or yeah. So I mince it up. What I've been doing, and this is like I guess the last couple of months, and it's 2 or 3 times a week, is I'll take it usually comes in like strips that are like 6 or 8 inches long, and they're half an inch thick. I'll take a whole like little strip of it and not dice it, but just sort of like cube it up, and then I'll just drink it like I'm taking pills, and I'll just put 2 or 3 chunks and just drink it down raw. Because I've heard that's the most nutrient dense way to consume it. And it grosses out my wife, she'll like look at me in the corner of my eye. She's like, again? I'm like, yeah, a couple times a week. Yeah. She's like, oh man, because it's so minerally. And then and my kids are like, are you just like swallowing raw meat, Dad? Like, yeah, don't act so surprised. Like, I'm doing it again. Yeah.
The kid, that's level 2 for you. Right now you guys are at level 1.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't even know, but you're just like, well, it's funny, I think, for anyone interested, I think it was Chris Kresser who did an article and just like broke down just the nutrition facts and et cetera on grass-fed, grass-finished liver. And I don't recall what he compared it to, but it was something like some other, I don't even know, like a vegetarian food that basically was touted as like, something that has a tremendous amount of nutrients. And it's pretty striking. And so it's not surprising that, just a little bit goes a long way. Yeah. So however someone wants to eat it, but I love that you're doing that raw in that way. I'm going to take a page out of that book and I'll do it.
I've got a pretty strong stomach and no gag reflex. So I can, it got me in trouble in college, cause I'd get into beer chugging contests in college. Like, like 2 or 3 beers in a beer bong would go down like that. Actually made kind of a lot of money on it in college because we'd set up bets. We'd go to house parties and they'd bring in the heavyweight and like we just take bets. One night we made $600 on beer chugging contest with me. Yeah. Anyway.
All right, liver chugging contest is next. We're gonna start a new fad. Yeah, right. Gonna wash it down with some bone broth and like let's go. Let's go.
Had to go viral. So I would love for you to give everybody a little bit of a high level sort of Mike Salemi origin story. Your life path I think is very interesting because I know that you got started in your craft early. You found great mentors, you learned from the best, you committed to your trajectory, and I think it's a really unique and I think it's a really interesting story, especially for folks who are like under 30 who are listening right now. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're an expert in, how you got there, and how was it that you have begun to continue to grow within your sort of level of expertise, please?
I love that, man. And one of the words that you shared was trajectory. And so like when you first shared that word, one of the things that came up for me was like, if I were to look at least my life, from when I first started getting into movement, which was as a young age as a gymnast, and I had a silver medalist from Bulgaria as my coach, not when I was that young, but a few years later. When I look at from the series of events that started then, which I would say were probably the most shaping moments of my life as an early age that were put me on this path, the trajectory is not linear. And looking back, like the trajectory, and even now, like every single day, like I'm making mistakes, I am learning, I am getting my butt kicked. But I truly do believe that if part of your mission is to grow and to continue experiencing deeper or just more, more beauty in life, like you're going to be challenged and you're going to even seek out challenges. I'm not saying that I want everything to be hard, but I don't want things to be handed to me. And so the trajectory is like this. I would say in the long run, it's in the upward direction, but it's up and down and up and down. And it's never been. And in fact, so I started as an athlete, started as a young kid, as a gymnast, and then competed there. I would say that was the base for my understanding of movement and working through fears and understanding body control and what it means to be coachable and team. And what's interesting, and I was never a super high level gymnast, but to be honest, like for me, it doesn't really matter. Like it's just like, what are the lessons? What do you learn from the environment that you're in? And thankfully, my parents are the ones who put me in that environment. And I think gymnastics, jujitsu, even wrestling are all great foundations for any kid to be in. When I was approximately 14, I had a lower spine injury, and that took me out of gymnastics. And then I had a growth spurt, and I was never going to be an Olympian. So, you have a, hard talk with yourself and you realize, okay, this is not necessarily for me or as far as I want to go. But the person who rehabbed me, so at that point, at that moment in life, if that's all and you're training 6 days a week, sessions are at minimum 3 hours a night, it's like that's your life. And then when that gets not taken away, but that becomes to a harsh end due to an injury, you're almost forced to you're forced to reinvent yourself or to find something to give yourself more meaning. And so from there, I transitioned into competitive powerlifting, and it was the person who actually was responsible for rehabbing me, chiropractor Dr. Mike Ludovico, who was a drug-free bench press champion at that time of the world. He brought me into his basement powerlifting team. He's like, dude, my favorite part of gymnastics was conditioning. My favorite part of freshman year of football, which that's all the year I did, was I didn't want to be on the field. I was third string running back. I was just leave me in the gym. I don't want, and then I realized how much I loved weightlifting and what the lessons I learned. And so this theme of sport, to injury, to powerlifting, which I got injured as well, to transitioning to Olympic weightlifting, to kettlebell sport, these sports that I competed in, each transition came through injury. And so that's what I would say. I mean, those injuries and those transition points were massive shapers in terms of my philosophy now and why I see performance not just in the physical realm, but every other aspect, mental, emotional, spiritual, to support the physical. So that's kind of a little bit about my background and how it shapes my viewpoint on performance right now.
Was your upbringing within sport, was it as beneficial to you as anything else? I mean, did you have loving parents and team sports? I mean, for someone to, at 14 to have an injury where your athletic career takes a drastic change, that's pretty formative. Was sports the thing that taught you the lessons that you still carry today?
Yeah, sports have been huge for me. And actually, I would say when I was a kid, thankfully, I have amazing parents. I'm very blessed and very fortunate, supported my mom, my dad. And I will say, when I was growing up, they were working a lot. My dad had many jobs, but my dad, we had moved from California because before that, my dad had a family business where he was laying marble and granite. So countertops, etc. Very hard physical labor work. And it pretty much destroyed his body. Knee replacements, I think shoulder surgery. And so when we moved to California, we wanted to start fresh.
So something happened to your audio, my man. You got really quiet there for a second.
Huh. Maybe is it better now?
No, it's still pretty quiet.
Oh, let me try and, how's that? Is it any better?
There it is.
There it is. Now it's
back.
Check. Now there's an echo.
Oh, really? That's weird. Huh.
Test.
Yeah.
Test. That's never happened on this mic. I'm wondering.
Yeah. There's a pretty. I'm getting an echo on my end. Yeah, you just went 40% quieter. Actually,
Okay, I'm gonna keep talking. I'm just gonna keep dialing this knob. You tell me when.
Yeah. Let me.
Is that better?
Go back up.
Okay. Keep.
Yeah.
Better.
Go back halfway. Yeah.
How's that?
That's better. That's cool. Okay, we're back on board.
Okay, I'll just stay right here. I won't move.
Yeah. No, I think it was some hookup or something like that. Yeah, that was a little strange.
Okay. Let's see. Where were we at?
Talking about dad and the family business, supportive parents.
Yeah. So I mean, when we moved to California, we came here to really start fresh. And so my dad, had the knowledge of what that industry needed, and essentially took his experience of being, working in manual labor and laying all this stuff to actually manufacturing tools for that industry. And so, I'm super sorry, man. Can you repeat the question because I want to make sure I'm going on the right.
You know what? Let's bail on that track.
Yeah.
Let's bail on that track.
I'm so sorry, man.
That's okay. We'll start from here. Tell me about the how you met Paul Chek and and what he meant to you and your life, because I think that's a name that a lot of people are going to recognize.
Yeah, what's interesting is, so when I was competing in powerlifting, it was a small, close-knit powerlifting team and just really blue collar guys, great guys. And one of my teammates in there, one of his best friends from high school owned it had multiple names, but essentially it was like a holistic lifestyle and performance center. And this guy, Brian Champ, who I later partnered in business with, was one of the first Chek practitioners in the Bay Area. I think he was the first or the very few, like years ago. And he modeled his entire facility after Paul's teachings. And so he had all Chek practitioners in there, functional medicine people, hypnotherapists, good chiros, like the whole acupuncturist. And so my buddy brought me in. He's like, dude, you got to meet Brian. Like especially when I was 14 and went into powerlifting, I just knew from that moment, this is something that I wanted to do. Like I knew I feel very blessed and very grateful that it was just something innate. Like I found weights and I honestly can't really explain. It wasn't something thought. I just felt this is where I'm meant to be. And so he introduced me to Brian, brought me, he's like, you got to meet my boy. And at a young age, I was exposed to how to eat, move, and be healthy. And I actually did a trade with Brian. I was competing in powerlifting, and he would help me on my nutrition and lifestyle management. And then I would teach him powerlifting. And so we developed a really good relationship. And then he kind of coached me up, and I basically became the performance guy, I would say, of his gym. And he was also the strength coach for a few different colleges and got me in the door to some like a D1 school, which I was the strength coach. So I first got exposed to Paul Chek's work there and got to experience it. And then I started taking his courses. And when I was competing years later in kettlebell sport, I had an injury to my left forearm, a compartment syndrome, and no one could figure it out. I spent 2.5 years seeking every practitioner I could under the sun, good people. I learned a lot about myself, but no one could really solve it. And it was causing me to completely lose feeling in my hand. My forearm would swell up with blood. It was super painful. And essentially they wanted to cut the fascia, or the connective tissue that cases the myofascial that cases the muscle. And I was in one of Paul's courses, and I basically, at the end of the course, I had just reached out to him and I was like, Paul, dude, like, he's pretty much, for those who aren't familiar, he's made his career on solving medical failures, pretty much. So those cases that no one could figure out, from professional sports teams to diseases, etc. So he's like, he was actually, believe it or not, he was the first person or practitioner that I worked with that didn't promise that he could fix me. And I was like, wherever he got, and again, they were all great people, a lot of respect to everyone that I work with. But one of the things that usually the practitioners I was working with, like, looked at the body through one lens. So whether they were, let's say, a rolfer, which is a great modality, can be super beneficial for people, they're looking at it from just the rolfing lens, right? And they feel like that every problem can be solved potentially through that one modality. And maybe that works for some people, but that wasn't true for me. And so Paul was like, I'm honestly not positive, Mike, but from what you're telling me, he felt around, he asked me some questions. He goes, I do think I can help you, but you need to come down to San Diego. I'd have to get you on my table. I'd have to assess you, and I'll do the best I can, but I can't promise you that I can fix you, And so I was like, holy smokes. The first person who didn't promise that they were going to solve it. And I was like, all right, let's do this. And so I committed to 2.5 years of once a month flying down to San Diego, working with Paul for 1 to 2 days at a time. Wow. Massive financial investment. I dropped out of being in a master's program of functional medicine and nutrition to fund that, and a few other sacrifices, but it was the best investment I ever made.
Wow. I want to dig into that a little bit. I think especially now, when during this, the recording of this is during, smack dab and hopefully what's the middle of a global pandemic, and people are having to make hard choices about what they commit to, what they spend their time doing, how they want to transform themselves. Can you talk us a little bit about what your thought process was when you decided that you were going to put your faith, time, and money into someone to fly down? You said once a month for how long?
Usually a 1 to 2 day coaching, because it's very like focus work. So it's a full day, usually minimum half day on a quick session.
And how many months in a row did you do that?
2.5 years. So you're looking,
wow.
sometimes maybe it would be 5 weeks, maybe it wouldn't be 4 weeks exactly, but it would be between 3 and 5 weeks at I would every intervals like that.
How did you know? How did you know that was the right thing to do? What it went through your mind to decide, you know what, instead of going through this advanced program that is directly in line with what I want to be and what I want to do in the world, instead I'm going to commit to go down and get treated by this guy once a month for 2.5 years. Can you walk us through if you can remember, what was going through your mind at that time?
Well, like one of the biggest things that comes up is, for those of you, and you're very familiar with Paul Chek's work, like if you look at like just Google him right now, right?
Yeah.
Type in Paul Chek on Google Images and you'll see, I mean, he's close to 60s, he's in late 50s, and the dude is more jacked than I'll ever be. And he doesn't take, I can 100% tell you with full certainty, knowing him being a dear friend, there's no steroids, no juice at all in that guy. It is full, pure nutrition, sound training, good mental, emotional management. And so, I knew that there was the coaching process with Paul is incredibly in depth. It covers, even though I was going to him to help solve an orthopedic or a physical issue, the coaching by no means was just physical, no way, shape, or form. And the amount of changes that I went through during that process beyond just the physical, I honestly don't know if I would have been open or willing to elicit that much change if it wasn't with someone who eats, sleeps, and breathes as much as he does. And so it's kind of like, I mean, I don't have children, but you have children. But one of the things I could speak from even my own father or other mentors, it's like there's certain things that are said, and then there's certain things that are observed. And as children with our fathers or mentors or whoever, it's oftentimes we learn so much more through the observation of what they're doing, right? So even though my sessions were really great with Paul and incredibly skilled on program design and periodization and that sort of stuff, I got as much, if not more, just spending time with him and observing how he lives. And so I just knew the way he lives his message, that was the biggest thing. That was the thing that I felt. That was the, I'm more of like a heart-centered person. So I try to go more with the heart and then the mind as opposed to thinking so much, even though I think a lot too, but it was just a gut feeling. And so I try and tap into that internal sense, and it just felt right. And yeah.
Well, that's incredible. So walk me through a little bit of your. So now we have this again, the word trajectory from your, being a talented and gifted young athlete to an injury that sort of changed the course of your trajectory, competing, and then finding a mentor that you could really model and learn from and grow from. What are some of the things that of your teachings that are now yours, that you put your own signature on, that you have helped your people, and I know that you've helped many people with their movement, with their health, with their performance. What are a couple of the key things that you've learned through those sort of earlier days working directly with Paul Chek?
Yeah, I mean, that's an awesome question. Even though people seek me out for movement, I would say first, like that's the door that's most open, at least I think in our Western culture and in the States and stuff like that. Like people see me lifting kettlebells or teaching or Bulgarian bags or band training, working, whatever. And movement is typically what they come in for. But the biggest thing, man, is it's not just about movement. Like, again, that is the door that's most open, but there's so many things that can support movement and make people better movers that don't have to do with movement. And so, like, for example, like even with the plant medicine work, right? Like last year I'd taken a group, like 17 people down to a retreat center in me and a buddy, Connor Moore, down to Saltara. And, I don't have anything to do with the ayahuasca. I wasn't serving, nothing like that. But my contribution to the group was just organizing people a great safe space that they can explore this stuff. But like I contributed movement. And so what I contributed was a class around working in, which is a concept that kind of Paul coined. So energy cultivating activities. Think about the combination of movement with meditation. And you can do these working in activities to focus on different zones or different energy centers of the body. So whether it's even spoken or not, or I've explained it to the group or not, how the class is designed is to get people to move and to move their emotions. And so, at least in my experience, a lot of the medicine work or the inner work doesn't have a movement component. And maybe it's just because I'm a mover, and I've really resonated with that I feel like I process so much through movement. And so that is, people may think that they're doing movement when they come to me or whatever, but it's so much more than that. So a lot of let's say specifically athletes, I work a lot with fighters or fight coaches. And so, and I'm speaking also from personal experience, because a lot of times the injuries I had were due to overtraining and pattern overload and burning out. And it's you got to think too, working out is one component. That's the energy expenditure activity. That's what we're all super familiar with. But it's the inner work that provides the energy, the vitality to do outer work. And so one of the biggest things that I have to do and had to learn was how to do more working in so that I can in turn do more working out and balance. So for me, it's it's about movement, but it's not. And so it's much, much more than that. So that is, I would say, and it's a direct influence from Paul, and then how I've maybe utilized these working in principles to specific tools. So I'll teach people, will do band training, and the movements are just beautiful and fluidic and embodied, but I'll take them through these working in principles. For example, a working in movement, you should not, and this again comes from Paul, but you should not sweat. Your tongue should stay moist. Your heart rate should not elevate. Your respiratory rate should not elevate. Your digestion, you should be able to do it on a full stomach. So you can take these principles, integrate breath with movement, and through some of the tools that I love teaching, you can have a very cool movement exploration and have it leave you more energized as a result.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. And one of the things that I absolutely wanted to get into with you today, this is a perfect segue, is movement as medicine. We're stuck at home. All of us. We are all stuck at home. And so for the people that love the ritual of grabbing their gym bag, jumping in the car, driving to the gym, working out at a whatever pace that they are, getting their bag and coming home, that's gone, right? That you can't do that right now, and that's hopefully about to change very soon. But not only for those people who understand the benefit of the ritual of preparing to work out, but for the rest of us who don't really go to the gym, who are either stressed out by watching what's going on in the world or just being at home with our kids and being overloaded, there is so much to be learned from basic movements and how it will help us process the energy that we're dealing with. It will help us see more clearly, think more clearly, love more deeply, sleep better, all of those things. Can you tell me how you think of movement as a medicine?
I was have you seen the movie The Motivation Factor by chance?
I haven't.
So I'd highly recommend. It's kind of tied into what we're talking about, but one of my clients, really just badass jujitsu guy, and he's been trying to get me to watch this movie for must be 8 months, right? He's in his 50s, intense guy, coaches his kids in this exact same way, but essentially the movie Motivation Factor looks at historically just how soft we've gotten as a country. It takes a look primarily in the 60s and the physical education system in the States. And specifically, they kind of look at one main high school. I think it's called La Sierra High School. La Sierra High School in California. You would be blown away at what these kids had to do as normal PE. One of the tests at the higher level of the students, and every student had 8 packs and all this sort of stuff. Can you guess one of them? And I was looking at the testing for this stuff, and I want to see if I can even do it now. They had to carry another classmate on their back, right, and go a walk. take a guess. Take a guess at how long they would have to go for. Now, this is the higher tier, but take a guess.
A quarter mile.
Okay, quarter mile. Great. That would be.
That'd be extensive.
Bro, 5 miles without setting a kid down. They would have to tread water for 2 hours as well. And these are not water polo kids, but this was standard PE in their high school.
Wow.
And it was just so amazing. And they bring in a lot of, medical doctors, scientists, and they talk about these correlations about, these correlations between mental health, emotional health, academic health. And essentially, like, one of the things that was I was really curious, and this was during the years of the president's not coming to me, but was it Reagan? No, it'll come to me. But the reason why they stopped essentially was, from my understanding, once the Vietnam War happened, there was, like, politically and stuff like that, anything, because to run that type of fitness education, especially because it's one that can be used with masses. And in fact, they also show us a country, don't quote me, either like Finland or something like that, or I think maybe it was the Czech Republic, but they show the same type of physical education run with like 1,000 people on a field, all dialed in. And the only way that you can run that type of physical education system and scale it across all these people is it has to be more military style.
Sure.
And so from my understanding, anything that resembled a military thing after the Vietnam War, they didn't want to do anything for political reasons. But, like, when you look at movement as medicine, I mean, you could look at it from many different areas. You could look at it from, like what we talked earlier, the working in focus. Like, for me, meditation, and I've shared this with some people, like, meditation as just a Westerner, I'm an Italian kid, and both my parents are from Italy. Like, meditation was never something in our household. And it always was something that I would see in movies or whatever that looked strange to me and intimidated me. And I was like, man, that looks kind of weird or scary. And, I have, again, Paul and the Chek Institute to thank for bridging this gap between movement and meditation to where you can take simple movements like a squat or something that I was familiar with in the gym and provide these little criteria, or, like, again, as I was mentioning earlier, just integrating breath with movement. And some of the most beautiful aha moments or awareness moments all happened through those working in movements. And so you can look at movement as medicine in that respect. We can also look at it like these kids, for example, who were taught sound movement when they were, young. And they actually, what's amazing is they interview people later in life who are a part of that La Serra school or those years that they had that education, and how many of them are still doing those same 12-minute routines and what it's done for them over the years, and people from all walks of life. And actually one gal, because they had testing for these different levels at the school, kind of like a ranking system, and they had closed La Serra High School right before she was able in her junior year to, like, take her test. And this is whatever, we're looking at the 60 years ago, etc. She started just bawling, crying on camera, and you could see what those things meant to them. And so, I mean, movement as medicine can be looked at it from many different angles. But when I see, as a country, our loss of routine or ritual and these physical practices, like, they can spill over in any way, any area of our life to benefit them.
Yeah, I think people are sort of out of ideas. Maybe you've got equipment at home that you haven't used. If you're a gym goer, maybe you've got some dumbbells or a jump rope or something kind of sitting in your garage, nice and dusty, that you haven't pulled out in a while. I'd love to take it further and get some of your ideas, because obviously, when it comes to slanging around bags of sand and, like, friggin' battle axes and, this is your jam. Like, what are some things that people can do? What's the maybe you want to include minimum effective dose sort of activities, but for somebody who's, like, out of a groove, they've been home for a while, they either were in an exercise groove for a little bit, or they just realize, man, I have to move my body. I know that I need to. I really don't fucking want to, but I should. Where can people start? Where should they start?
Oh man, that's a great question. So I would say the cool thing, at least about what I've, for just whatever the reason, just gravitated towards has been these unconventional training tools. So kettlebells, I think I've been using for 17 years-ish. Bulgarian bags, over 10 years. And if those of you who aren't familiar with Bulgarian bags, check them out. They were developed by the former U.S. Olympic coach in Greco-Roman wrestling. They were developed for creating Olympians. But when you look at what an Olympic wrestler needs to do, move in multiple planes, multiple patterns, change their level, accelerate, be flexible, be mobile, it's the exact same thing that most of us need to do to live healthy and happy lives. So even though it was designed originally for wrestlers, there's a massive application to other areas. And so band training, all these tools, it only takes one. In fact, like my Kettlebell Lifestyle program that you mentioned in the beginning, the whole program was designed that not if you just had like a set of one kettlebell, that if you only had one single kettlebell, what could you do? What could you do? And like one Bulgarian bag, I've been using, 90% of all the work I do with a Bulgarian bag is with the same weight, 26 pounds. That's it. So if you know how to use these things, you don't need very much, even a jump rope. So I would say the most important thing, if we were to even take it back a step, is just to move. Just to move. Body weight is excellent. In my experience, the best exercise probably that anyone could ever do, for many reasons, and we can chat about them, is simply walking. So a 20-minute walk, and this is something that you can do right when you wake up. First thing that you do, create the routine, create the ritual. For me, one of the differences, I guess, between a ritual and a routine is a ritual for me feels like it has more intention behind it. And so whatever it is, start a 20-minute walk minimum. If you can, and you are willing, I'd invite you to leave your cell phone at home. Go for a 20-minute walk, and you will see your life completely change. It's when you look at like Eastern cultures, like the Chinese who are doing Tai Chi in the park and those things. When you look at typically the people who live the longest and longevity, most always the exercise that you see that is common in all of them is walking. Yeah. And walking is a working in activity. That's why when you eat a big meal and you go out to eat, etc., and you go for a walk to your car, you're like, whoa, feel a little better. Mm-hmm. You can integrate things. So I would say start with walking every day, minimum 20 minutes. And once that becomes a habit, an ingrained pattern in your daily life, it doesn't feel stressful, it's supportive, then build off from there. What I tend to see is people try to do too much too fast and they overcomplicate things. So start with the walk, and then once you have that routine in place, then build from there.
Perfect. So let's say that's a low bar for people to do, and they say, okay, cool, yeah, I'm gonna follow Mike's advice. I'm gonna start going for a walk in the morning. Then what? Then what's next?
Now, this is my perspective. Now, when I'm looking at movement and longevity in the long term, because again, coming from someone who's been injured and works with a lot of like helping, kind of, I guess you could say like, I think where maybe I serve, where my skills can really support people is bridging I can work with higher performance athletes for sure, but I really get a lot of love and joy in bridging the gap between when someone's out of like an injury and then someone wants to get to high performance, kind of that bridge there. And so, when you're thinking about it from that respect, mobility becomes like one of the biggest things. And so when I'm looking at even any movement, so let's say like everyone loves like the kettlebell snatch. Beautiful movement, total body movement, works the legs, works the back, works the upper body, is going to get your gas tank going, all those things. But that's a movement that requires specific prerequisites. So before you can do a snatch, you have to look at what is the quality, the range of motion, the joint health of the shoulder. If you don't have good overhead range of motion, stability, and flexibility, which a lot of people in our society don't have, then no matter how great, how sexy, how good a kettlebell snatch can be, it's not right for you in that moment. And that's one of the hardest conversations that I have to tell athletes and tell coaches is like, I'm not saying it's a bad exercise. There's no bad exercise. I'm not saying you won't be able to do it, but I'm saying if you want to be able to do this for the long term, then we have to go back. And so what I would suggest is walking, then progressing into like a joint mobility flow. And that could be something very simple. Knee circles, pelvic rocks, spinal roll downs. I post on my Instagram a lot of stuff, tons of free stuff on YouTube, etc. So I would say a brief and basic mobility routine. Then from there, then I would go into more dynamic stuff. And to keep it simple, look at total body movements. Look at, for example, like for me, I think like deadlifts kind of get coined as the king of all lifts. I truly believe the squat is the king of lift. That's my feeling. But body weight squats, just knock those out, whether it's when you wake up in the morning or after your walk, do your 20-minute walk and knock out 3 sets of 30 or 5 sets of 30 of body weight squats at a steady rhythm, exhaling down, inhaling up. It's an unloaded exercise. Start there. So body weight movements, total body movements, keep it simple in the beginning. So if you think about squats, lunges, presses, so like a push-up, if you can get a pull-up bar, do some type of pulling exercise. Literally just those things, those 4, a push-up, a squat, a lunge, and if you can, do a pull, a band row, or a pull-up, sets of 10 to 20 at an easy pace. You do a circuit like that, back to back to back, 3 sets of that with a 1-minute rest period, and bro, like we're talking, you're good for a good amount of time.
That's great. That's phenomenal. I mean, that rolls out of your mouth like butter, and it lands so nicely because it's so simple, it's so easy, it's so accessible, and I think I think for a lot of folks right now, it's time to go back to basics. It's time to like really assess where am I at? What do I need to do? I'm really glad that you mentioned the mobility stuff before. Yeah, I mean, like going whole hog, going big heavy weight when you haven't done it in a while and your shoulders aren't moving properly. Yeah, that's really great advice. The thing that something that sort of jumped out to me as a reminder, I don't remember what it was, and hopefully you know what this was. It was a longevity assessment based on being able to pick up heavy shit. It was like, by 65, I don't know if this was like Dom DiAgostino or something like that. I don't remember where I heard it, but it was like, you want to be able to bend down and pick up your grandkids at 65. And that's a practical application of your mobility in your hips, the strength of your core, the strength of your back. Does that ring a bell at all for you?
That's not the only thing that does ring a bell, and honestly, I'd have to look further in it. I know there's been quite a bit of studies done, if I recall correctly, on grip strength and aging.
Right.
And so they use what's called a hand dynamometer, which is like a super precise grip measurement tool. And I would use it with Paul when we were checking, and this is something I found to be super interesting when I was working with him, like the correlations between our organs and our glands and the muscular system. And so what I was finding was every specific organ reflexes into a specific muscle group. So as an example, the stomach is on the same channel as the left shoulder. The liver is on the same channel as the right shoulder. And the way that the organs and the glands express and display pain or dysfunction is they can express those through the muscles. And so if someone so my issue with my arm was in the left arm, right? And the left shoulder, always unstable, always issues. And we used the hand dynamometer because it was a grip issue to also see how certain things were affecting my grip and not. And one thing that we noticed was, because I always had gut issues as a kid, fungal infections, parasites, bacteria infection. I had H. pylori, stomach ulcers. And and at that time it was coffee. When I would have coffee and let's say my stomach would get a little irritated, we noticed that my grip would get worse. And so it was just I just wanted to bring that up because it was something like one of the biggest aha moments that I had, and understand that if we have a shoulder problem and we just treat it from a mechanical lens, or we just try to go, maybe that's where we start. But unless it's a direct impact trauma, like, I don't know, like I fell down off my bike and I know the specific incident of what caused that issue, usually the root cause is coming from somewhere else. And we have to look deeper. And so that was one big aha moment. But I do recall, and I was thinking about Paul with the dynamometer, there's some type of studies out there in correlation between old age and grip. And so that's the only thing that comes up for me.
Yeah, interesting. So you because you were doing gymnastics, is that how you could tell when you were having gut stuff that your grip was failing?
No, so in kettlebell sport, for those who aren't familiar with kettlebell sport, this grip issue didn't show up until when I was competing at a higher level in the sport. And I was trying to go after, there's different rankings, and you could think about like the black belt level is called like master of sport. It's a ranking qualification system. And so I would compete in multiple events, but my event that I really loved was something called long cycle. And so you take two 32-kilo kettlebells, so about 72-ish pounds in each hand, and you cannot set the bells down at all. You have 10 minutes unbroken. So in 10 minutes of an unbroken set without setting the bells down, you swing the bells through the legs, clean them to the chest, and then jerk them overhead. So you do essentially a continuous clean and jerk for 10 minutes with kettlebells about 144-ish pounds, and your only rest period is here overhead with the elbows locked out or at chest level. So that was what I was trying to go for, and so my grip would just give out, and I couldn't reach at that point until I was rehabbed properly that level. And so when I was working with Paul and like I was sharing the coaching with Paul, even though it was very performance based, performance is way more, and as you know very well, way more than what you do in the gym, and it's what you're eating and all the other things that we've chatted about. So we were able to make the correlation between food, nutrition, organs, and then what was being expressed through the muscles and therefore limiting performance.
I'm just picturing 70-pound kettlebells, 10 minutes straight, swinging through the legs, and then, Jesus. Like, whoa. Just blew my mind there. Just trying to wrap my brain around that. Wow.
It's pretty. So that's the professional division. You can compete with lighter weights, and then I also compete with a double 40-kilo bells as well. So 80 pounds or 88 pounds? I forget exactly. It's been a minute since I did the conversion, but 88 pounds. So double 40 kilos, long cycle or clean and jerk, and I would compete with that in the 5-minute category, not the 10-minute. But I would say my one of my most proud moments, I guess you could say, was when I was able to hit Master of Sport in 10 minutes with double 32s. And then I got excited. So I came back a few hours later in the competition and entered the double 40-kilo category. And I got I think it was within 2 reps or 3 reps or something like that of hitting Master of Sport in the 5-minute with the 40s in the same day. So that was something I was really, really stoked about. Yeah. Nice. Almost got it. Almost.
And as you talk about it, your smile grows. I love that. Nice thinking about it. How do you think of this is obvious and low-hanging fruit, but how do you think of exercise and movement as a way to manage stress and deal with anxiety and sort of mental anxiousness?
Yeah, I think that motivation although they talk more about the productivity and the academic side, I think, but there is a massive correlation between the stress response and physical movement. And again, we all process things differently. And I think it's a good question because I think there's a fine line that needs to happen. I think movement can be a very good stress relief, but one of the things that I see a lot when people would come into my movement seminars, workshops, or certifications, etc., in the Western world, I was in this category as well. I overtrained. I thought that just pushing, I'd have a hard day and I'd beat the shit out of maybe a punching bag or have a crazy workout and I would feel better, right? Endorphins are going. But one of the things that I had to learn over the years was to be aware of when that was actually supportive and maybe when that wasn't supportive. So movement, we can look at it very broadly, right? Do I think movement as a whole can very much help the stress response? Absolutely. But the type of movement is where we really, and the volume and that sort of stuff is where we really got to be careful of. So maybe a walk or a working in thing could be helpful. And sometimes pushing it, yeah, for sure. But if that is our response every time, I've had so many people come to workshops that literally massive bags under their eyes and you could just feel and see they're just going through a lot. And I just wanted to tell them I'll refund your money. Just go home. Go to sleep. Just go to sleep. I don't want you. I don't want. So in that respect, maybe modify the workout a little bit and whatever. But movement. It's movement is medicine, but we also have to look at the therapeutic dose because there's benefit. Just like anything, food can be a very beneficial thing, and food can also be a hindrance. Sleep. All these things, it's either if we sleep too much, with most of us in this world don't do enough of it, But if you are too yin or do too much, like you slept, let's say 16 hours a day, I don't know, you would need movement to balance that out. Everything we're talking about is the balancement. And so the movement as medicine idea, it's like we need to find the right doses, the right prescription, how and when to use it. So again, it can be very beneficial, but I think if we ask ourselves a question in that moment and check in with ourselves, like, why am I moving in this way today? What would be the right approach? Should I do some gentle movement, or is today a day where I feel like just ready to crush it and I have the energy, I slept good, then I can go after it.
Yeah. I think a lot of us probably, and I mean, I don't want to assume, and when I say things like a lot of us, it does assume, I wonder where people are at right now. I wonder whether or not they're, I am going to assume for those people who are slumping right now, who are staying at home, they're not going to ball games, they're not watching any sports on TV, they're not seeing friends, they're home a lot, they're managing work in a new paradigm. For those people that lack that motivation to even get started, they don't know where to start, they don't know what to do. Obviously walking is a simple solution, but I'd love to hear your take on what's worked for you or worked for some of your clients to become mentally motivated to just begin. Like what works for you, what works for your clients, and what might work for other people just to get them going.
Yeah, so it's funny you brought this question, and I'm going to show something to you right now in the screen. This came up in a group coaching call that I had last night for my Kettlebell Lifestyle program, and the topic was like goal setting and just getting people started. And right now, most people, like, our sense of control is like taken away, and our rituals and our routines and the gym and like that sense of community and that those extrinsic motivations. Like right now, we're forced to be intrinsically motivated. And if we haven't had that, it can be really challenging. And one of the things that's worked for me, and again, this is what's worked for me, so keep that in mind. But I found this, which is a whole thing here that I've saved from when I was a child. And I've always been,
Mike is holding up a basket of notebooks with papers, and the thing, I mean, it looked heavy for Mike, so it must weigh 700 pounds.
So like these are training logs from 17 years ago.
Wow.
Training logs, goal setting logs. And I just have always done this. And, I've always been like, I can look at, man, this is like just so many memories when I look through this stuff. And I'm looking at like my PRs, my personal records. What are my goals in the gym? Like, what do I want to achieve? And so what I would suggest and encourage as a starting place, especially if your schedule is thrown off, is to start writing things down. And I do think in whatever way you write things down, amen to you. Like, that's awesome. You can type it, Google Doc. But there's something, at least that I've found, there's a difference between writing by hand and typing. For me, like when that pen goes to the paper, it's like there's like more emotion in it, or it lands or something. So the best thing to do is start creating a ritual, routine, and schedule for yourself. Print out a calendar. The out of sight, out of mind idea or notion for me has always been very true. So I would print calendars and have them everywhere, on my fridge, on my table, on my desk. When I was a kid, man, my whole like computer and desks would always be filled. My closet is like got an office closet over here, and it's just filled with stacks of Post-its. And I've got all the goals and what I want to achieve, and so not just the goals, but the process of how, the developmental small bite-sized chunks that are going to get you there. And these planners from look at it, 2005, 2006, 2004, like this is, 2001. So this has been a big thing that served me really well, was writing things down, creating a schedule for myself. It doesn't take any more than 5 minutes. Record what you did in that day and just start developing that habit. And if you can start creating some semblance of structure for yourself right now, it's going to go a long, long, long way for you.
Yeah. Obviously, that level of detail of tracking that you've done is probably a little unusual. It's probably not, you're on the high end of tracking and accountability, and it works. It works. The output, the result of tracking things closely and watching progression and executing on these goals has led you to health, performance, wisdom, satisfaction in business, in your physical career, in helping people and making a difference in the world. That there's something that we can all learn from that. If you haven't written shit down in months, and you don't have any goals, and you don't know what the fuck you did yesterday, and you don't know what the fuck you're gonna do today or tomorrow, like, it's probably a good idea to write some stuff down. Write how you moved. What is it? What gets measured gets, what gets managed gets measured. What's measured gets managed. I think that's really great advice. And for folks that don't have that inclination, that aren't oriented in that way of tracking what they do and how they do it, now is the time.
Aho to that. Yeah. And back then, like, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I was just writing, I was writing whatever down, just sets and reps. I'm looking at one from 2002 when I was, we're 18 years ago. I'm 33. So do the math, 15 years old. But I wrote stuff down, and I'm telling you, like, it was just that pattern, that habit, like, will spill over in everything. Like, it started for me in powerlifting and gymnastics and schedule and routine. But just like you're saying, it's had an effect on every other area of my life. So the reason why I loved weightlifting or powerlifting so much, as an example, is it was a very objective way to measure progress. Like, I knew as a kid and would build confidence and all these things just by saying, okay, this week or this month, like, man, I increased the bench press 5 pounds. Mm-hmm. And I could see progress, more weight, more large pizzas on the bar. We used to call the 45 pizza. Nice. Like, more pizzas on the bar was just a massive sense of achievement and progress and confidence and learning and failures and wins and coaching and learning how to be a student. So what's learned in the gym has served me so well. And that's definitely something I think that I try and share as much as possible and encourage and invite people to hopefully be open to.
I love it. What are you wildly passionate about right now?
The everything that we talked about, like right. This podcast is like super, super stoked. But the Kettlebell Lifestyle program that I talked about is essentially I just released the beta phase just right now, and I'll be launching it in a few weeks. And essentially, like, what you heard of everything that we've talked about is reflected in that program. So it's kind of crazy. On the back end, incredibly complex. On the front end, very simple and intuitive. But essentially, one of the things that I learned through working with Paul, for example, and the injuries was, I was always trying to be a good student. Like, I'm always, to the best of my ability, to want to be a good athlete and all this stuff. And I've been fortunate enough to have some really great coaches, and Russians and Bulgarians. And again, I don't believe that there's one way to the top. That hasn't been my experience, and certain things work for certain athletes and certain mindsets. But in my experience, to a large extent, most programs are overly rigid. And so what happens is I would get a 3-month program, and I'd be working under a great coach, and I, no matter what, would not listen to the signals, the symptoms that my body was giving me, and I would push through and push through and push through. And that's what led to overtraining. And so with Paul, and one of the things that he implemented was we would do crazy tracking every day on daily readiness assessments and looking at mental, emotional, spiritual, all sorts of stuff. And I'm not saying everyone has to do that by any means, but what I am saying is we utilize that to help modify the training and where I was in that moment. So if I was going through a relationship challenge, or I had a fight with someone at work or whatever, you would see my stress response change. And now we have more like heart rate variability and things like that to measure. But essentially what the program does is I don't have technology like a watch or anything, and I did that on purpose, like a 5-question questionnaire looking at gut health, looking at joint health, looking at mental emotional health, looking at sleep, and essentially basically what you check in with your training readiness assessment, your program on that day modifies. And so if you're super stressed out, it's going to give you working in recommendations, active meditation, stretching. And so it's a program that's designed and built around one kettlebell and body weight and meeting people where they're at in that moment. So even though it's like a 9-ish week program, it could freaking take you 6 months, and it's going to meet you where you are and teach you how to listen to your body and follow the training suitable for you in that moment. So there's breath work, morning routines, kettlebell training. I bring in Paul Chek's in it, like he did lectures on working in and sleep. So it's just a bunch of the mentors that I've had over the years and buddies. And again, really meets people dynamically with where you're at. So I'm like over the moon about that program and supporting people as best as I can through it.
That's cool. Where can people find that or connect with you to get that when it's ready?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram, which is just my name, Mike.Salemi, Salemi. And then the program, you can just go to kettlebelllifestyle.com, and then you can check it out there, what it's about. If anyone has any questions, just please feel free to reach out anytime as well.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I like to end each episode with anything else that you feel called to speak out or to mention. Before I ask the last question, people know where to find you, and this has been a really great conversation that's both really practical but also really heart centered, and your story is inspiring, and the way that you show up in the world, Mike, is really. You attract people because of just being yourself, and so I just wanted to honor that in you, and I really dig that about you. Is there anything that you want to speak out before I ask the last question?
I think like what's coming up in this moment, because we were talking about writing stuff down and goals and etc. Like what I would encourage everyone to do is like, no matter what the goal is, fuck it, just don't like go for it, in the sense of like it's very easy to be influenced by society or maybe this isn't a good enough goal, or I shouldn't do this. It's like if you got something you want to go after, go all in on it.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Create the plan, create the schedule to support, put in the work, but don't let anyone tell you can't do anything. Because I'm telling you, like when I was 15 or 14 in 2002, I didn't know what I was doing. But over time, friggin' 18 years later, it's maybe gotten me somewhere. It's served me in some way, in some light. So whatever the goal is, just be willing to put in the work and be honest with yourself in terms of what that's going to take, and start taking those steps. But don't let anyone tell you can't do something. So if you got something you want to go after, just go for it and do it.
That's excellent. That may have you may have answered this last question already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So what I do is it's a fill in the blank question, and feel free to elaborate on it as much as you want. So if you would fill in the blank, everyone would benefit from knowing
breath. Yeah, the importance of breath, how breath can be integrated with movements, how breath is healing, how breath is life. When I feel most stuck in my life, I feel like the worst feeling in the world for me personally is feeling stuck. Like feeling, movement as medicine, like life is movement. And when I feel the most down, it's usually when I feel most stuck. And the first thing that I try as best as I can to remind myself is to breathe. Everything gets better. Everything. And so breath for sure.
Awesome. Mike Salemi, thank you so much for joining me today on the Optimal Performance Podcast.
Thanks, brother. Thank you for having me.
And scene. That's it.
Awesome, dude. Awesome.
Great.
That was super fun, man. Hopefully that was all right.
That was exactly what I hoped it would be. I'm gonna stop